Miketz, and this is also Shabbos of Hanukkah. So, as usual, whenever a holiday coincides with a Torah reading, even though the Torah reading was not designated for the holiday, we know that there's always a connection between them. And therefore, we will look for some connections in this week's Parsha, this week's Torah portion as well. The name of the portion is Miketz, and it refers to what happened at the end. Ketz means the end of the 2 years that Joseph stayed in prison because he was thrown into the prison by his master's wife, who accused him of trying to seduce her. And at the end of these 2 years, Pharaoh has a dream, and of course the rest of the story is that Joseph is taken out of the prison, and he is the one who interprets Pharaoh's dream successfully and is promoted to the position of viceroy. But let's go back to the word Miketz. Vihi Miketz, and it came to pass at the end, Shnosayim Yamim, 2 years. The word Shnosayim is 2 years. So it has been said that that word is an acronym for 5 words that give us the basic rule of lighting the Hanukkah menorah, or as it's called in Israel, Chanukiah. And the word Shnosayim is an acronym for Smol, Neros, Tadlik, Yamin, Mezuzah. Let me translate. Smol means on the left side, Neros, Tadlik, you shall light the candles. Yud stands for Yamin, on the right side, Mem is the mezuzah. The original enactment of the rabbis, the sages who established the holiday of Hanukkah, is to put the mezuzah on the right side where it normally goes, and you put the Hanukkah menorah on the left side of the doorway towards the outside. Once the weather conditions and the social conditions did not allow people to do it on the outside, it was transferred into the house, and there are 2 customs. One custom is to do it on the window, so it publicizes the miracle to the people who are going in the street. And the other custom is to do it by any doorway opposite the mezuzah. So that Hebrew word, 2 years, is an acronym that tells you the basic rules of the menorah. And we'll soon see that there are other connections as well. So Pharaoh has a dream. And what is his dream? That he's standing on the riverbank and he sees 7 fat cows being swallowed by 7 terribly lean and meager cows, and they don't change. Great diet. You can eat all you want and you don't gain any weight. Second dream, he wakes up and he has another dream, a similar dream, but this time it's not with cows, it's with stalks of grain, very fat, full stalks are swallowed up by meager stalks, and they remain meager. And he wakes up and he doesn't know what to do. He is baffled by this dream and troubled by it. And none of his officials, his dream interpreters, his magicians, his sorcerers, none of them could give him suitable explanations until the butler of the king, who was in prison with Joseph and had his own dream that Joseph successfully interpreted, comes to Pharaoh and says, I know a Jew boy. That's how he calls him, Nar Ivri, a Hebrew youth. But it was a form of a slang and a derogatory one as well, calling him this young, very unimportant individual who's not even a member of our culture. He's an Ivri, he's from the other side. But he knows how to interpret dreams. And Pharaoh takes him out of prison, and he interprets his dreams that the 7 fat cows and the 7 fat stalks refer to 7 years of plenty that will ensue. They will be followed by 7 years of terrible famine. And Joseph says, what you should do is during the years of plenty, store food and keep it in storage places, preparing it for the period in which there will be a terrible famine. And Pharaoh says, you're the most incredibly wise person I know, and you will be appointed to my staff as my viceroy. Everything in this country will be guided by you. I will just have my throne above you. In other words, for all intents and purposes, Joseph is now the king of Egypt, the most powerful country in those days. So the question has been asked, why was Joseph held in such a high regard by Pharaoh when the dream interpretation is quite obvious? You see cows and stalks of grain. That's a symbol of food. And you see the fat ones means a lot of food. Swallowed up by 7 lean ones means a little food, a famine. You don't have to be a rocket scientist or a neurosurgeon to figure out that 7 fat types of food, whether it's animal or stalks of grain, is a symbol of plenty, and lean ones is a symbol of a lack of food, famine. And how could it be that none of his dream interpreters, who were smart people, the Egyptians were not dopes. They really knew their stuff. And how could it be that they couldn't figure this out? Rashi quotes a midrash that says that they told him, you're going to have 7 daughters and you will bury 7 daughters. You will conquer 7 provinces and you will lose 7 provinces. And he didn't like those. Why couldn't they think of the simple one? Then the second question, which commentaries ask, is Joseph starts giving Pharaoh advice. Pharaoh didn't ask him for advice. Pharaoh asked him to interpret the dream. If Pharaoh had said to Joseph, what do you think we should do? Then it would be the right thing for him to respond with advice. But the king didn't ask him for anything. He just keeps on going. He's on a roll. He interprets the dream and tells Pharaoh what to do. And Pharaoh says, you're the most brilliant guy, as if this was something so brilliant. The Rebbe explains that, in fact, it was brilliant. Why? Because there's something about the dream that the dream interpreters couldn't figure out. At least they couldn't give a suitable explanation. And what is that? When Pharaoh has in his dream a vision, he sees the fat cows, and then he sees the lean cows at the same time. Now, if the 7 fat cows symbolize years of plenty, and 7 lean cows symbolize years of famine, how could they be simultaneous, contemporaneous? How could they exist at the same time? If there's plenty, there's no famine. If there's famine, there's no plenty. They couldn't figure it out. So they had to then go away from the idea that it refers to food and that it refers to daughters. You can have 7 daughters and you can lose 7 daughters, 7 other daughters, and so on, with conquering 7 provinces. And Pharaoh said, no, it doesn't make sense. Why would there be a dream about daughters and provinces represented by cows and wheat? When Joseph told him that, he says, you know what? The dream's interpretation contains within it the solution to the problem as well. Because when you prepare the food in the 7 years of plenty, it's as if that in the 7 years of famine, the 7 years of plenty are there. The food of the 7 years of plenty are in the 7 years of famine. And likewise, the 7 years of famine are existing because of the 7 years of plenty. Moreover, when the 7 years of plenty, you're thinking about the 7 years of famine. So in a certain sense, they are coexisting. And when Pharaoh heard that, he said, you're brilliant. Not only did you interpret the dream properly, but you demonstrated how the dream contains within it its own solution. The Rebbe concluded, this is a very lengthy essay, discourse, that dream is a metaphor also for golus, for galut, for the exile. In the exile, we have so many strange experiences. Dreams allow for contradictions. We are walking contradictions. During our prayers, we're inspired, or other times that we're inspired. Then we go about doing our own business, we lose that inspiration. That is what makes exile so confusing. It's a dreamlike state. So what do we want to do? We want to run away from it. So the Rebbe says, no. The dream itself contains within it the power for its interpretation and its solution. That means that the energies of redemption are embedded within the golus, the exile. If we penetrate the golus, we will find the dynamic of redemption. Going back to the word Shnasayim, Yamim, 2 years, Miketz, at the end of 2 years, a Hasidic commentator says that Miketz, at the end of days, in the Messianic age, the age that we're in right now, we're on the very threshold of the Messianic age. So we are, at this point, Miketz. The word Shnasayim, which means 2 years, can also mean changes. The word for year in Hebrew, Shana, also means change. At the end of days, in the pre-Messianic age, or we can call this already the Messianic age, as the Rebbe did, because we're already seeing some of the energies of the Messianic age entering into our world, we have to realize that there are a lot of changes. If we just go back in the last 20, 30 years, we see incredible changes in the world, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and many, many more things that are changing. Israel's status in the world is changing, its ability to flourish. There are so many things that are going on in the world, in the macro world and in the micro world. Many of them are negative, but most of them are positive. Then we go on to another connection to Hanukkah. We know that Hanukkah we light in the 8 days in differing order. In other words, we start with 1 candle, second night 2 candles, and 3, then up to 8. That's the opinion of the school of Hillel. The school of Shammai says no, the first night we start with 8, we then go down to 7, all the way down to 1. And I think there's a hint to the school of Shammai in Pharaoh's dream. Pharaoh dreams of the fat cows being swallowed by the skinny cows. There's a diminishing of the cows. The same thing with the stalks. Because whenever we deal with different procedures, we can do it both ways. We can go from the bottom up, we can go from the top down. And the school of Shammai says we go from the top down, and that's reflected over here. But then the question is, why would it be reflected in this Torah portion? Why would the school of Shammai be reflected? Don't we follow the school of Hillel? We go in ascending order? And the answer is, I have to refer to what I just mentioned before, that the word Miketz, which means the end, referring specifically to the end of 2 years that Joseph was in jail, but it also alludes to the end of days, the Messianic age. In the Messianic age, the great Kabbalist, known as the Arizal, tells us that we will then follow the school of Shammai. We will light the menorah of Hanukkah in descending, declining order. And that's hinted over here in the dream where there is a declining order. Okay, so the Torah then says how famine starts and Jacob's sons have to come to buy grain. And they come to Joseph, and it says Joseph recognized them, but they did not recognize him. Why didn't they recognize him? So Rashi says because when he left, he was 17 years old, he didn't have a beard, and now, this is 20 plus years later, he had a beard. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation that he cites from the Midrash, that when Joseph had the power to do whatever he wanted to his brothers, he recognized that they were his brothers, and he had pity, he had compassion for them, empathy for them. They did not recognize him. When he fell in their hands, they didn't treat him as a brother. So it's more than just recognizing the facial features. It's about recognizing. Now, why does Rashi not satisfy with a simple explanation that they didn't recognize him because he had a beard and he didn't have one when he left, when they sold him? I think it could be because Rashi feels that that's not by itself an adequate explanation. Because Joseph, we know from other sources, resembled his father Jacob. He was a spitting image of his father Jacob. His father Jacob had a beard. True, Jacob was much older, and Jacob's beard was probably white, and Joseph's beard was black or red, whatever color. But still, it's hard to imagine that they wouldn't recognize him just because he had a beard, because he looked so much like Jacob. So therefore, Rashi says it's deeper than that. They didn't recognize him because he was a different kind of person. They didn't have this empathy. He had empathy. So, and they knew Joseph as an empathetic person. They were not. And now they see another side of Joseph. He's tough. He doesn't sound like the same Joseph that they left. And there's another deeper explanation why they didn't recognize him. Because they couldn't imagine that Joseph could successfully reach this position where he could remain Joseph and he could still be the prime minister, the viceroy of Egypt. Because in their mind, spirituality and holiness cannot coexist with the material world. That's why they were shepherds. They were isolated from the world. To find someone who's the viceroy, the leader of a country like Egypt, which was not known for its morality, and to remain loyal, they couldn't recognize that. That was something that was foreign to them. One final thing at the end of the Torah portion, when they come back with Benjamin, because he tells them that unless you bring your brother Benjamin, I'm going to keep Shimon here. He was arrested. Don't bother coming back. So they plead with their father to send Benjamin. At first he doesn't want. Reuven says, I'll let you kill my two sons if I don't bring him back safe and sound. And Jacob thinks that's foolish. Why would he want to kill his grandchildren? But when Yehuda says, I guarantee I will bring him back, Jacob accepts that. And the reason for that is, as commentaries point out, because Reuven was not giving everything away. He was not guaranteeing it. Yehuda guaranteed it. He says, absolutely, I forfeit everything, this world, the next world. I will guarantee it. There's no way that I will not bring him back. When he heard such steadfastness and such commitment to saving his brother, he knew that this would succeed. And Yehuda is the ancestor of King David and of the whole Davidic dynasty and of Mashiach, because that's what a Jewish leader is, and that's what Mashiach is about, saying, I will succeed. There's no way that I will allow for failure. And just one other point, when they finally came back, Joseph threw a party for them, and it says they all drank, and they got drunk. And Rashi says that this is the first time Joseph ever drank wine since he was sold, and the same thing was true with his brothers. They didn't drink wine since they sold him because of their father's misery. So the question is, why did they drink wine now? They didn't know that Joseph was really Joseph. So they should have still felt the mourning experience that they had until then, and that's why they didn't drink wine until then. So one Hasidic commentator explains that Joseph gave his brother Benjamin more things than he gave the others, more gifts. Well, that was the reason they were jealous of Joseph, because he got this coat of many colors. He got this very special coat, and that's what caused the jealousy. And here, Joseph was giving his brother Benjamin, which was their half-brother, additional things that he didn't give them, and they didn't get jealous. And when they realized that they no longer had jealousy, they were thrilled and they celebrated by drinking wine. That's an incredible thing, that people celebrate not physical and material achievements, but spiritual achievements. And that's what Hanukkah is really all about. That's another connection to Hanukkah, because Hanukkah was not necessary. The miracle was not necessary. If the Jews had not desired total purity of their religion, if they were willing to compromise, the Greeks were willing to compromise with them as well. You want to do a mitzvah, but don't do it because it's divine. You want to learn Torah, do it because it's beautiful poetry, beautiful prose, deep, intricate laws, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of philosophy to it, but don't turn it into something divine. Compromise. And likewise, when they came into the temple and they found oil that was contaminated, Jewish law said you're allowed to use it in a pinch. You don't have anything else. You can use contaminated oil. They said, no, we're not going to use contaminated oil. We want pure oil. But you're allowed to do it. We're not compromising. We want purity. And that's why we celebrate Hanukkah, because the greatest achievement is when you can get spiritual purity. And that's what we'll all experience. We'll get a taste of it on Hanukkah, and we will get the full course and drink heartily with coming of Mashiach very soon. Have a good evening, a good Shabbos, and a happy Hanukkah.